I now give you Louise Jett.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. While we agree about many things, we are not totally like-minded, and we can learn from each other's differences. Which leads me to my topic. I'm going to talk about the edge effect, diversity, creativity, and ethical culture. So when I was a young adult, I moved to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and everything was so new and exciting. While the city had its faults, like all cities do, I adored living close to the ocean. I spent a lot of time at the beach, and my favorite places were the parts of nature where the sand of the beaches meets the flora of the forests. I had to drive out of town a bit, away from the tall buildings and crowded sidewalks. But when I did, I would find some beautiful, secluded places like I had never seen before. There are not many beach woodlands, maritime forests, or ocean beaches in Illinois, my home state. These places of forest and sea were rich with diversity. Many species of trees, shrubs, grasses, vines, and other plants with well-developed root systems thrived in these salty, wet homes. There were many willow species, pin oaks, button bushes, water oaks, and other beautiful greeneries. These magical places where the ocean meets the trees illustrate the edge effect at play. Ecologically speaking, the edge effect results in greater diversity of life in a region where the edge of two or more adjacent ecosystems overlap. But social scientists also propose the edge effect can help cultivate creativity in people who are exposed to different cultures. The edge effect may have been at play when some of our most revolutionary thinkers had creative breakthroughs, possibly even when Felix Adler founded ethical culture. It may even be at work in our congregations right now. First, let's examine the edge effect from a social scientist perspective. Many social scientists believe that exposure to different people affects our thinking, and in fact, diversity can foster creativity and productivity. Think of the saying, birds of a feather. There is a comfort in familiarity. We often surround ourselves with those who hold the same values and political views, who laugh at the same jokes and have the same interests as we do. There's often discomfort in learning and being exposed to new things and new people who are different than us. But social scientist Adam Galinsky has found that people who have developed deep relationships, deep meaningful relationships with someone from another country become more creative and score higher on routine creativity tests. Galinsky said, there's something about deeply understanding and learning about another culture that's transformative. And he said that on an episode of this great podcast that I love called Hidden Brain. And the episode is called Creativity and Diversity, how exposure to different people affects our thinking. And I'll put a link into the chat. I'll put a link in the chat to the podcast once I'm finished with my talk. This talk was actually inspired by that podcast episode. It got me thinking about ethical culture and our ideas and the way that we come together. Galinsky's research found that people could have a boost in temporary creativity just by reflecting on intercultural relationships. And he believes the boosts are really driven by the fact that people had learned more about another culture. And that sort of cultural learning, actually reflecting on that culture, can lead to increased creativity. Researchers at Tufts University pretty much came to the same conclusions. When they introduced racial diversity into a group, all the people in the group began to broaden the scope of their thinking and to explore more options. You might be thinking that creativity is tough to measure. And if you're thinking that, you're right, but it can be done. And by analyzing divergent thinking and convergent thinking is how we do it. And I actually have a little video I would like to show that explains these approaches to problem solving pretty well.
Imagine you have a problem that you need to solve, and you're looking for innovative solutions. In this moment, there's a good chance you'll choose one of two cognitive approaches. In 1956, the psychologist J.P. Guilford coined the terms convergent thinking and divergent thinking to describe these two contrasting approaches. Convergent thinking is linear and systematic, while divergent thinking is more web-like, focusing on the connections between ideas. Convergent thinking narrows down multiple ideas into a single solution. On the other hand, divergent thinking expands outward by generating multiple ideas, often thinking like a hacker and using materials in original ways. Here you treat barriers as design opportunities. Convergent thinking tends to be more focused, while divergent thinking is more flexible and iterative. Convergent thinking is analytical and focused on what's best. By contrast, divergent thinking is more open-ended, and participants are encouraged here to take creative risks, even if some of the ideas might not work. Convergent thinking asks why. Divergent thinking asks why not. Now, it may seem like these two approaches are competitive, but they actually go hand in hand. Often teams will use divergent thinking to generate multiple ideas, followed by convergent thinking to analyze and narrow down the ideas, and then later you'll use divergent thinking to come up with fresh perspectives, followed by convergent thinking yet again in this ongoing cycle. Both are necessary.
So convergent tasks are ones in which there's a single right answer, and divergent tasks call for you to brainstorm lots of different ideas. Carl Duncker, who was a Gestalt psychologist, created an experiment called the candle problem. He wanted to show how minds solve tasks differently. And the experiment is a great way to test someone's divergent thinking skills. During the experiment, people are asked to situate a candle in such a way that the candle, when lit, doesn't drip wax on the wall, table, or floor. They're given a box of tacks, a candle, and some matches. When Adam Galinsky tried this experiment on a group of Princeton undergrads, only a small percentage of them could solve it in 15 minutes. Does anyone know the solution? If so, maybe you can put it in the chat. If not, don't feel guilty. The reason the solution eludes us and so many others is that in order to realize it, we have to think of ordinary objects in a brand new way. Most people don't see the creative way to solve the problem, which is to empty the tack box, tack it to the wall, and put the lit candle in the box. In his study, Galinsky also gave the participants these remote association tests. For example, you give people 3 words and ask them to find the one word that connects them all. Let's do this now. Here are your words. We have manner, round, and tennis. What's the one word that connects them all? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. The answer is table. You can have table manners, hold round tables, and play table tennis. It definitely takes some divergent thinking to get the correct answer for this remote associates test, but depending on our backgrounds and perspectives, the same words can mean different things to us, causing word puzzles like this to be really hard to solve, especially independently on our own. Galinsky and his colleagues found that in every round of his creative tests, the group of volunteers randomly selected to reflect on their experience dating someone from another country outperformed those asked to reflect on their experience dating someone from their own country. He said these participants had increased the flexibility and originality of their ideas, and he could see the edge effect at play throughout each of the individual problems. He said this shows how robust and powerful the edge effect really is in his research. Now that we've explored generating lots of ideas, we've explored how generating lots of ideas is a sign of a creative brain, and how the edge effect is illustrated in nature and psychology. Let's talk about how all this may apply to ethical culture. Ethical culture founder Felix Adler and his family came to the United States from Germany when he was 6. He was the son of a prominent rabbi in New York. And when he was 15 years old, he went back to Germany to study. He attended both the University of Berlin and the University of Heidelberg. While he was in Germany, it was like a curtain had been lifted from his eyes, and he had seen the world for the first time. He lost his belief in a man like God, and he became a non-theist. When he came back to the United States to become a rabbi and spoke to his father's congregation, he omitted any mention of God from his sermon. The congregation rejected him. Adler envisioned communities that are committed to living ethically and dedicated to moral action in the absence of belief in God or eternal rewards or damnations. He found ethics as the common ground for and at the root of diverse religions, spiritual doctrines, and humanist thoughts. Certainly, this is divergent thinking at play. A church without God? The phrase still sounds revolutionary today. In fact, not too long ago, in 2004, the ACLU of Missouri represented the Ethical Society of St. Louis in a challenge to an attempt by the St. Louis County to rescind its status as a religious organization for tax-exempt purposes, on the grounds that in order for the Ethical Society of St. Louis to be considered, or Ethical Human to be considered a religion, we must profess a belief in a supreme being. The Ethical Society of St. Louis challenged this presumption in Missouri law that the worship of a supreme being is required to be considered a religion for tax purposes. Tom Blumenthal represented the Ethical Society at the St. Louis County Board of Equalization. The board recommended, and the St. Louis County Council approved, the restoration of the Ethical Society's tax exemption. Thankfully, they found ethical culture to be a belief system that seeks to address religious needs of members without reference to God or a supernatural reality, and ruled that belief in a supernatural or the supernatural was not needed for tax exemption purposes. This is how revolutionary Adler's idea was. Even in the 2000s, we were debating it. I absolutely think he was a creative thinker, and the many books, speeches, and approaches to education and community that he brought forth demonstrated his ingenious abilities. Perhaps the people he was exposed to in both New York and Germany helped him reflect on his theism in a way that led to this creative breakthrough, which Ethical Society of St. Louis leader James Croft has called Adler's big insight. This idea of a religion without a deity, this creation of a non-theistic church. This insight speaks to the fact that despite what we believe, we are being human together. And this insight stresses the importance of our communities. Adler once said, "The custom of meeting together in public assembly for the consideration of the most serious, the most exalted topics of human interest is too vitally precious to be lost." In other words, this place where diversity in thought and opinion comes together, where the forest meets the sea, so to speak, is reverent and too important to be left untended. About a year ago, I took a virtual offering called The Foundations of Ethical Humanism with Randy Best, leader of the Northern Virginia Ethical Society. During our meetings, Randy gave some insights into Adler's personal beliefs. Adler believed there was something greater than us, that we are both individuals and a part of a whole. And it is that tension between the two that creates the great union of community. I liken this tension caused where two ecosystems meet or multiple cultures collide. Adler believed we are all an essential part of this great thing he called the ethical manifold. People have inherent worth and dignity because we are a part of this greater whole. We are grounded in worth. Adler believed that human worth and dignity was the very fabric of the universe. He saw this as a common thread in many religions and put all religions on the same plane. Maybe this is why ethical culture invites a mixture of ideas. Different viewpoints with different people provide for a richer, more meaningful experience. After all, we are free to believe whatever we want. We understand how we are in relationship with one another, how we treat each other is truly what matters. Adler also believed our moral development is tied to helping others morally develop, and that moral unity is the divinity in all of us. He appreciated both unity and plurality. Each of us is different, but we unite to create this greater whole. We saw the value in our difference. He saw the value in our differences and appreciated the places where we come together despite these differences. These spaces are fertile ground for innovation. This could also be the edge effect at work. Felix Adler said, the unique personality, which is the real life in me, I cannot gain unless I search for the real life, the spiritual quality in others. I am myself spiritually dead unless I reach out to the fine quality dormant in others. Adler advocated developing the uniqueness of others, and he saw the utility of our distinctive unlikeness. For example, you've probably heard the first part of his new practical ethical rule, which is to seek to elicit the best in others, and thereby you will bring to light the best that is in yourself. But are you familiar with the second part of that rule? To evoke the distinctive unlikeness of others, and thereby you will promote and produce the distinctive unlikeness, which is your own essential self. Adler sees the value of diversity and encourages us to use our differences in a way that creates our own vital existence. In 1867, Adler established the New York Society for Ethical Culture. He adopted an ethic apart from any religion or dogma. Adler developed a non-theistic religious humanism and initiated a number of social reforms. Ethical culture congregations were and remain places for moral energy and social activism. The ethical culture movement has served as a fertile ecosystem where the power of others is provoked and lifelong meaning is cultivated. Since generating lots of good ideas is the sign of a creative brain, let's examine the quality and longevity of some of the ideas generated within the ethical culture movement. Still under Adler's leadership, voices of prominent civil rights leaders were amplified within our congregations. Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and James Weldon Johnson were given space within ethical culture to share ideas and champion equality. In 1909, ethical culture leaders signed a petition calling for the creation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. And the following year, Adler also served on the first executive committee of the National Urban League. Leader John Lovejoy Elliott was a co-founder of the National Civil Liberties Bureau, which was the predecessor of the American Civil Liberties Union. And that was formed in January 1920 by Roger Baldwin. Baldwin, a social worker and native of Boston, moved to St. Louis in 1906, where he taught the first course in sociology at Washington University. And he was also the first director of the Self Culture Hall, a neighborhood settlement house founded by the Ethical Society of St. Louis. In the early years of ethical societies, we offered reading rooms to workers and kindergarten for children at a time when it was really uncommon. In 1944, ethical culture leader Algernon D. Black founded the Encampment for Citizenship, a summer program for young adults with the purpose of encouraging political activism and volunteerism that seeks to educate its participants about civic responsibilities, participation in government, and tolerance of diversity. Eleanor Roosevelt was an early supporter of the program, which still exists. We are seeing not only good ideas, but ones that are long-lasting as well. Ethical society members remain outspoken in their activism and their ideas. Though not perfect, Adler's congregations continue to strive to live up to his vision of ethics-centered communities. His concept of immortality was what people leave with us when they are gone. Adler left us this unique ecosystem where we can come together even if we don't agree. It is in these places where values meet deeds that transformative work takes place, and our world can be shaped into one that is more fair and equal for all people. This is Adler's legacy. This diversity in thought and experiences, this absence of religious dogma, it gives us permission to expand outward by generating multiple ideas and taking creative risks. Our meeting spaces, whether we're virtual or physically meeting or both, these spaces remain open to everyone and continue to be where a fertile ground of public assembly can take place. This assembly can result in thoughtful conversations and impact ethical action. Do we need more diversity in our congregations? Absolutely. Do I see us doing the work to get there? Oftentimes, I do. I want to leave you with this Felix Adler quote. He said, "There is as yet no civilized society, but only a society in the process of becoming civilized. There is as yet no civilized nation, but only nations in the process of becoming civilized. From this standpoint, we can now speak of a collective task of humankind. The task of humanity is to build a genuine civilization." This is no simple task, but I believe we are still up to it as long as we do it together. Our congregations are proof that regardless of what we believe, we can come together to solve some, if not all, of the pressing problems we face. We can unite to further compassion and lessen suffering. We can be human together. What we as ethical humanists truly embrace is the fact that what we believe matters much less than how we treat one another. Thank you so much for being with me today. I'll stick around after my talk to discuss the topics I've covered and answers the questions to the best of my abilities.
We have Jim Norman come on up and unmask.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Louise. You make me think of one word, and the word is civilized. And I'm wondering, what is the root of civilization or civilizing or civilized? What does it mean? And seems like a simple question, but I'd like to know, what is it to become civilized?
You know, I studied anthropology a little bit, and my instructors would say that the first signs of civilization were ones that showed we were taking care of each other. There were mended bones. There were people with serious deformities that we cared for, that lived far beyond what they, what the record was showing us, before we became civilized. So for me, and I think even from an anthropological perspective, civilization began when we started caring for one another. And caring for each other isn't just like the physical care of our bodies, but also like caring for each other spiritually, helping each other cultivate meaning in life and live meaningful lives where we're free to believe and question and accept responsibility for our choices and actions. So while, depending on the civilization, that definition will vary, I really think it speaks to taking care of one another, and that we as human beings, we are the ones who build these civilizations. So it's up to us to make sure that they're grounded in ethical culture.
Thank you.
Okay, any more from the room? I'm going to take my privilege as being presider to comment something, piggyback a little bit of what Jim said. Oh, and I don't need to use this because I have my own mic. The quote that you had from Felix Adler at the end, what struck me are the two words becoming civilized. And there are a lot of difficulties at the edge when we have two communities, two cultures coming together. There is some friction sometimes, and it struck me as kind of thinking of always becoming something may help in those times, because everyone needs to do some adapting in order to fit together. I don't know if you want to make a comment on that, but that was my comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, when we disagree with others, you made me think it's so important for us to respect the individual and talk about the point of disagreement, to not personally attack others that we disagree with, but to go after, if their way of thinking is detrimental or denies other people their humanity, it is wrong. And it needs to be spoken about. We need to confront them, but we can confront them in a way that respects and upholds their dignity and goes after the bad behavior that denies others their humanity. So I think it's really important to go after the bad thought and not the person.
Okay, thank you. On to Zoom, Peter.
Okay. Yeah, beautiful presentation, Louise. Really well presented. I like how you connected the edge effect using the natural examples, things coming together to make things better. Our next is Pamela.
Thank you very much, Louise. That was wonderful. I really, really enjoyed your talking this morning. But it brings me to a question, and it's kind of hard for me to ask this without sounding prejudiced. But if Felix Adler was able to attract such wonderful men as Booker T. Washington and Webb and all of these great speakers and people, why can't ethical culture attract more Black people? Most of the congregants in our own platform, in our own ethical cultural society, are from white, Jewish or Christian backgrounds. Why is it that we can't attract more Black people? Is there something that we need to do without being how do you pronounce that word? Evangelical? In other words, without going out and prospecting for members, how can we attract more Black members to our society?
I've heard many people speak on diversity, and I'm not an expert. I'm an expert in graphic design, web design, and I dabble in ethical culture. I'm a humanist. I'm a congregational humanist. Humanism to me is my religion, but I mean, I hold space for secular humanism and respect it, you know, just as much. It's everybody's I respect all belief systems, respect them. But what diversity experts will say, and I've heard them say this over and over again, is it should be inclusion and diversity, not diversity and inclusion, because the inclusion brings the diversity. So when you have inclusive speakers, when you have inclusive events, when you focus on inclusion, diversity will follow. So inclusion of different speakers, of people of color, of LGBTQ plus people, you know, think intersectionality. We all come to, you know, have all these parts of our personality that come together, and just being really thoughtfully inclusive about our programming. And then that is what attracts the diversity. When you put diversity before inclusion, you end up with almost this kind of token diversity that's sometimes used to meet quotas, or, you know, show, look how diverse we are, just kind of like a status symbol. And it rings hollow and it doesn't last long. But when you put inclusion first, you generate diversity. So I really think that's the key. That's not an original thought from me. It's from other diversity speakers that I have heard, and kind of what they say. And it really kind of stuck with me. So I would suggest having people of color speak at your societies, making sure your platform teams are thinking about inclusive programming to attract diversity in attendance.
That's it from Zoom for now, Susan.
Thank you, Peter. I was thinking about your convergent divergent example, Louise, and I think I've been involved in a lot of planning and committee meetings and things here at Ethical Culture, and I think a lot of us go with the convergent analyzing method. And wondering, one, have you also had that experience being now involved with ethical culture? And two, or also at the college level, because I think that's an analysis kind of, that's how we learn how to analyze. Mm-hmm. And number two, when you are performing the divergent thinking tasks, how do you try and prevent kind of that convergent thinking to come in and judge a task, an idea during brainstorming?
Yeah, great question. I just did a lecture this week at the college on creativity and how it takes bravery, right? Creative people put those ideas out there. Some of them are bad and they should be rejected. That's part of it, right? Just like, you know, he showed in the video, and it hurts, right? Any rejection hurts, even if it's just a little idea we have. But what I tell students is, there was a meeting once and people were sitting around the table and someone had the idea to make a movie called Sharknado. And they thought that was a good idea. And that movie was made. And it's actually a pretty popular movie that students know and talk about. So if Sharknado wasn't too silly of an idea for a movie, don't be afraid of your silliest ideas, right? And don't be worried if they get batted down. That's what it's about. That's what brainstorming is for. You're supposed to have bad ideas, but your bad idea might trigger or inspire a better idea from someone else. So there's strength in those duds. There's strength in failure. I talk really often about failure, embracing failure, learning from failure, and how we can adapt those lessons as we move forward in our lives instead of be defeated and not try again. because I think it's, especially I see it in students, they try and they fail and they're just like, well, that hurt. That was just mortifying and I'm not going to try again. So I like to flip the script and really, I believe this with all my heart. It is better to fail than it is to not try at all. And how we learn from those failures, that's how we will become successful. So anybody, if you ask any creative individual, even myself, for every time I've succeeded, I've failed at least 5 times, and you get up and you dust yourself off. And I do see that in ethical culture. There's this draw, even, I think it's a very human thing to be analytic and to be convergent thinkers. But when we break away from the norm, when we start to see objects differently, or, people, emotions, places and things, when we start to see them differently, that's when we have these really creative breakthroughs that result in meaningful change.
Thank you so much. Lots of head nodding here, Louise. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I would like to thank our speaker, Louise
We have
Jett,
one more.
again. Oh, we have, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sylvia has just popped in. Come on, Sylvia.
Sorry, Louise, what a great presentation. And I have to say that what you say about respecting that creative mind really resonates with me. I think, though, that part of what we have to understand as a society is that we have to allow people the space to show vulnerability, and to make it comfortable for people to maybe not have all the answers at first, and be accepting and willing to listen. So that, I think, is key, is allowing a space for vulnerability to be there and to be respected. But yes, thank you so much for your presentation. Really resonates. Thanks.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, and you made me think of something I tell my students. Oftentimes, they're graphic and web design students. They put a draft out there in the world, and their first thought is, this is crap. And then their second thought is, I am crap. And I say, skip that I am crap. It's not true. Just because in the draft's probably good. It's probably a lot better than you think it is. But even if it's total nonsense, not going to work for anything, you are not crap, but it's so easy for us as creatives to judge us like instantly on our work on a first draft and just throw it away. But we need to say, no, this is a start. And that's what I tell them to start early, because creativity takes time. Your mind can be chewing and developing. You start early. Of course, your first draft's not going to be as good as the last one, but don't belittle yourself. Again, it's like that idea of attacking the idea and not the person. That goes personally as well. Look, try to critically think about your ideas and your work, and not instantly, which is very human to do, fall back on, oh, this stinks, I stink too. But that's hard. That's really hard for people and creatives. And like I said, creativity takes bravery. And the more practice you get at it, the better you are at saying, okay, well, that was a bad idea. Time to move on to the next one.
Thank you. Peter, any more from Zoom?
That's it for now.
Okay, do we have any more from the room? All right. Now I would like everyone to thank Louise for that wonderful, a little bit of history lesson, and also a little bit of creative process. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Louise.
To learn more about us, visit our website, ethicalfocus.org, or email us at admin@ethicalfocus.org, and we'll get back to you. To make a donation, go to ethicalfocus.org/donate. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can watch many of our past programs on our YouTube channel.